Welcome. Tonight we are gathered here for the 9th Dialogue and Friendship Dinner organized by the Devon Center of North Carolina. My name is Todd Drake and I will be your host for tonight. I am a human rights artist, a photographer. I travel internationally and create works of art with marginalized communities. Tonight there are some examples of my work in the room that I'd like to share with you briefly. On the left are 3 examples from a Muslim American series that I did here throughout North Carolina. And I'll describe the pizza for just a minute, the pizza photo, because I'm sure you're wondering why that's here. So these works were created as self-portraits with Muslim Americans living in North Carolina. And the pizza piece represents a gentleman named Muhammad. He runs a pizzeria. And you might not think that's a very special meal, but I do. And that's because every day of the year, for the last 20 years, he has fed the homeless from his pizzeria. They simply walk in, and he knows now, of course, and he turns to his staff, and he serves them a piece of pizza and a drink, no charge. When I heard that story, I was deeply touched and moved, and we made it a self-portrait. You can see him hiding in the background. He wants to remain anonymous, I think partly because he's humble, but also maybe because his wife doesn't like him giving away so much free pizza. Now, on the right of the room are 3 examples of work from Bahrain. I travel with the U.S. State Department when I'm not in the States, and I create bodies of work and work through workshops. I just returned from Palestine, where I spent 3 weeks working with Palestinian youth. But in 2011, I was in Bahrain right after the Arab Spring. I literally drove past tanks to get to the Art Center where we were holding our workshop. The U.S. Embassy sponsored me. I think they were trying to make a statement about freedom of speech at that point in the history. And the students that created this work were very brave because they had no guarantee of freedom of speech. They live underneath a king. And since that time, unfortunately, there has been a certain amount of suppression. So these works are here tonight to honor them, but also to stand in for the people of Egypt and also the people of Syria and countries that are struggling. I met 2 wonderful ladies tonight from a church here in Raleigh that are representing the Filipino community. So I want you to know that my heart and all of our hearts go to you and your family at this time. So, enough about me. Every fall, the Devon Center organizes intercultural dialogues and friendship dinners. I've been lucky enough to host an earlier one last year in Greensboro. They bring together people from various backgrounds. Today, we have over 100 distinguished guests, including political leaders, public servants, academics, businessmen, and religious leaders. The Devon community is one of the most pleasantly academic groups I've ever been a part of. They're both intelligent and nice. Sometimes that doesn't match up. This is an important opportunity for the, hope I get to come back. This is an important opportunity for prominent members of our community to come together and to exchange ideas on social issues to enhance all of our communal life. This year's theme is finding common ground through service and dialogue. And I might also add art, because we've got some great artists here tonight. We have 3 distinguished speakers here tonight. Dr. Jeffrey Leiter from NC State, Secretary of State Elaine Marshall, and the Honorable Dr. Terrace Thomas from NC State as well. We also have our young members here tonight from both the Devon community and also from the larger community that are artists. Are any of those students here tonight? Could you raise your hand? Excellent. And any others? There's supposed to be 3. Yeah, wonderful, great, so you're here. Excellent. Now, what is that about? The Devon Center earlier this year organized a contest, art contest, around the theme, The Art of Living Together in a Diverse World. And tonight we're honoring the top 3 winners. So later this evening you'll get to hear from them and also see their work during dinner. They'll be projected on the screens. Okay, so let's get started. First of all, we're going to invite a member of the Devon community that represents the kind of up-and-coming young leadership that's going to, I think, take this organization further into the century very successfully. We're going to hear from, let me take off my glasses so I can read, Edka Karujan. I hope I didn't mess your name up too much, but he is a undergraduate at Duke University, pre-med, I believe. So join us for a few words.
Hello. Unlike Todd, I don't travel the world as a human rights activist. I stay in my small dorm room in Durham, North Carolina, studying chemistry late into the night, and every picture I take you can find on my Facebook profile page. So, on behalf of the Devon Center, I would like to welcome you all to our annual dialogue dinner. We at the Devon Center have a fervent desire and a strong passion. I'm sorry, I have to fix this. And a strong passion to seek harmony within diversity. Highly inspired by the teachings of contemporary Muslim scholar Fethullah Gulen, we believe that service to humankind and humanity is a service to God. We believe in loving each other, and we believe that the only way to overcome prejudice, racism, xenophobia, hate, and fear is to work together and accept each other for our differences. In this respect, I consider tonight a success as we welcome our distinguished guests from a variety of different backgrounds to discuss reaching common grounds through service and dialogue. The Devon Center has been serving the community in many ways to bridge the gap between cultures for our lovely community here in North Carolina for many years. For example, our trips to Turkey, as you will be hearing more about tonight, from our participants are a great way to bring together the East and the West, Turkey and the United States. There's also great potential in our younger generations, as they have displayed in our Living Together themed competition, works that are still displayed out there that you can see in the reception area after our dinner. I say that we cultivate this growing potential, reach out to every heart, and work together to make the world a better place, to live for everyone. A harmonious society of people living in a plurality of cultural beliefs. Thank you.
I know your salads are wilting slightly, but we have a few more opening remarks before dinner, so hold on tight. Next, we're going to hear some opening remarks from Jeffrey Leiter. Mr. Leiter, or Dr. Leiter, was born in Cincinnati, Ohio. He earned his bachelor's degree in history at Williams College in 1970 and his doctorate in sociology from the University of Michigan. He has been on the sociology faculty at NC State University since 1978 and now serves as professor and associate head of the department. His teachings center on work, organizations, and the economy. His research has ranged widely over such topics such as teacher autonomy, textile worker attitudes, student grouping and grading, organizational survey non-response, and child maltreatment and its impact on school performance. Most recently, his research has turned to nonprofit organizations. Jeff has been active in civic affairs. I hope it's okay if I call you by your first name. It's written here. He has served on Citizen Advisory Task Force for School Effectiveness and Efficiency for the Unified Development Ordinance. And he has worked through the Triangle Labor Group to support the NC labor movement and specifically to gain collective bargaining rights for North Carolina public employees. Last summer, he and his wife, the artist and writer Carrie Knowles, accompanied Devon Center to Turkey. And by the way, it's a great deal. If you can get over to Turkey, they take care of you while you're there. So I'm looking for an airplane ticket at this point. But maybe he'll mention that experience as well with some other opening remarks. Welcome.
Not so sure what I thought of the wilting salad remark. Volkan and Sardar, leaders of the Devon Center, asked me to talk a bit about dialogue, especially in nonprofit organizations. This is generally something we try to do rather than think and talk about, but I'll try. I think of dialogue as the sort of meaningful conversation in which we are interested in what the other person really thinks and feels, and are willing to reveal to the other person what we ourselves really think and feel. This kind of openness and risk-taking is not our everyday kind of conversation in which we are more likely just trying to get on with things and maybe trying to get something from the other person. So dialogue is different, and it's very desirable when we can reach it. The result can be a level of communication that moves us beyond where we are to build quite special relationships of learning, sharing, and cooperation. Building dialogue involves risk-taking as we open ourselves to others and reveal ourselves to others. Risk-taking requires trust. So our question in the end will be, how do we build trust between people? We might think that in nonprofit organizations it would be easier. After all, in nonprofits, we're not in it to make a profit, which often requires using other people, but rather attempting to reach some goal we share and usually declare openly in our nonprofit organization's mission statement. The Devon Center's mission statement is a very good example. To promote understanding, friendship, tolerance, and thus seeking harmony within diversity among cultures of the world through dialogue. This serves to bridge the gap in knowledge about the others, thereby reducing fears, prejudices, and misconceptions of the unknown. Sharing a worthy goal like this should make pretty straightforward the level of trust and therefore the openness to others and self-revelation necessary for dialogue. But if it were so straightforward, our thousands of nonprofit organizations with their worthy mission statements would be true fountains of dialogue. Unfortunately, they are not. They are much more familiar and ordinary places where people work and shirk, volunteer and burn out, laugh and gripe, make friends and become distant from them, have moments of pride and moments of frustration. What stands in the way of trust and dialogue in our lives, including in our nonprofit organizational lives? Lots of things, I'm sure, but I want to explore one that I think is quite widespread. Let me make up a story of work in a nonprofit organization. It could be the story of a charity, a new charter school, even an intercultural outreach organization. It's a small organization, so the people who participate all know each other by name. How do they get the organization's work done? They could do it by sitting together and figuring out their short, medium, and long-term plans, then getting to work according to the plans they have made. Basically, they would say, we'll all put in our time, our skills, and our money to get the work of our organization done. This is a very good way to work together for all sorts of reasons. The experience of cooperating successfully, especially with no one in charge, is very satisfying, and the group doesn't consume the time of one person to coordinate the work of the others instead of doing needed work. So there is an efficiency payoff too. There actually is a kind of dialogue involved, because making this sort of cooperative effort work requires really listening to other people's ideas, taking account of their worries, and revealing our own weaknesses and worries too. Some nonprofits do pursue their missions this way, but not usually. What gets in the way is what often happens when we sit down together and try to operate in this totally egalitarian, cooperative manner. We know that if we pull it off, we will all benefit, and we will move effectively and efficiently in the direction of our nonprofit's mission. But we worry, and here's the rub. that while we contribute our time, skills, and money, others may not. They are happy to reap the benefits of egalitarian cooperation, but they prefer to enjoy the benefits of our contribution while not making a contribution themselves. Or at least, in many cases, this is what we worry about. Because we don't trust others to cooperate and contribute, we are reluctant to do so ourselves. So many nonprofit organizations fall short of the goals they set for themselves for lack of trust and the sense of a shared fate and the cooperation that rests on trust and that sense of shared fate. They become more bureaucratic and spend precious resources on leaders who try to motivate, coordinate, even control workers and volunteers. As nonprofits move in this direction, participants are unlikely to engage in dialogue. People's relationships with one another are less about understanding and more about getting things done. But this unfortunate result is not automatic, and it is not inevitable. We may bring with us a lack of trust in others, a suspicion that others will leave us with all the work and cost, but this lack of trust can be overcome. And as it is overcome, we can let down our guards, work cooperatively, and start the active listening and self-disclosure that we are calling dialogue. And what is needed most of all to turn the tide is simply experience together. We don't come to trust one another right away. It takes time and experience. First, one person takes the risk of contributing or self-disclosure without any assurance of reciprocity. When this offer of trust is met by a trustworthy and reciprocal contribution or self-disclosure, the two have the beginning of a pattern of trust, of cooperation, of dialogue. Over time, the pattern becomes self-reinforcing and self-sustaining. It may even be able to withstand the occasional untrustworthy, uncooperative, self-serving act. The Devon Center, with its worthy goal of building dialogue, seems to understand how important time and experience together are in building trust. Terry and I have only been involved in the Devon Center's program for a year and a half, but I think we have counted 11 times together, all of them meals, I might add, plus our 10 days in Turkey last summer. Most of these have been at the initiative of our friends here at the Devon Center. It's on the way to becoming dialogue, to say nothing of friendship, that we value very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Leiter. I enjoyed those remarks. As an artist, I believe that is what we do, is we offer ourselves in vulnerability to begin a dialogue, at least, with our audience. So I think you're right on the mark there. Tonight, we're going to next have some openings from the Blue Devil Imam. Now, this is the name that he told me he goes by, so I use it with permission. Earlier this evening outside, I bragged about having been to Palestine, and he put me in my place quickly. He said, "Oh, really? Very good. I've been there 25 times." So let's welcome him. And by the way, he is the official Muslim chaplain of Duke University, so I think that's how he comes by his nickname.
Thank you, Todd. Good evening, and assalamu alaikum. I think giving a mic to a clergy right before the dinner is not a very wise thing. But you are safe with me, but I don't guarantee for fellow clergy on any similar occasion. It is absolutely a pleasure and honor to be here and say a few words about how dialogue can lead us to a common ground, or what are the possible ways in which we can shape interfaith, intercultural, even inter-citizenship, dialogue and conversation for creating a common ground. I think one of the ways in which First, I will start with a negative, that the dialogue can lead to a common ground of different faiths, different faith communities, different faith traditions, different ethnic and cultural groups. And it's a very wise way to start and exploring and investing in creating this common ground by investing, by exploring commonalities between different faiths, races, cultures, religions, and etc. But I think we will never be able to reach out to that strong common ground where these different faiths and communities can work together if we start that conversation, if we start that investing in common ground by exploring only our similarities, only our commonalities, only things that we share, only things that we only agree. I have seen over and over how these good, well-intentioned dialogue efforts ended up, unfortunately, receiving well-deserved criticism of nothing but singing Kumbaya, let alone creating that very strong common ground, because it only focused on our commonalities. It only focused on our similarities, things that we agree, things that we share in common, which is a wonderful thing. And it's a wonderful and wise way to start, especially if there are some potential sensitivities with those faith communities. But I think dialogue should not end there. If dialogue intends to create that common ground, dialogue also should aim bringing the trust, as my colleague earlier mentioned, or the conversations to a level where we can actually explore our differences. Because ultimately, what makes us who we are is not our similarities, our differences. And those differences not only can learn, can teach and inspire us in creating that common ground, but also can enable and enhance our ability to make that common ground very, very strong. For example, the kind of, giving a very specific example, talking about Israel-Palestine, most of the Jewish-Muslim conversations that I see, most of them, they survive because they avoid Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Because that's the biggest elephant in the room. They only get along if they ignore that that conflict doesn't exist, and they talk about how halakha and sharia is similar, how kosher and halal, etc. But if you look on the ground in Israel and Palestine, especially in the United States, the kind of Jewish-Muslim conversations actually create the common ground and do something substantial, are the ones who actually take those elephants in the room and gorillas in the room and create the common ground, and based on common ground, do something good, despite their political differences, despite their disagreements, despite irreversible, irreconcilable, unbridgeable divide in the way in which they weave that conflict out there. So let's start with commonality to create a common ground. Let's start with the similarities, but let's aim that we will not end there. We are not going to end there. And I think one of the ways in which dialogue, these kind of efforts which Divan is championing, on Duke campus, not only they only call me a Blue Devil Imam, but they also call me a Turkish Delight Imam. Because like the Divan people, I'm the proud member of this local Turkish community. I'm from Turkey as well. These dialogue efforts can create common ground with people of all faith, all culture, of no faith whatsoever. If we can really identify common challenges, common enemies, common problems, and we don't lack in the list of common challenges and enemies. There are so many, humanity is facing enormous amount of challenges. The one in Philippines is the most dire and most recent one. But here in North Carolina, in our Triangle area, the kind of challenges that we have been facing with poverty, with gang violence, with radicalization, with the increasing inequity and the increasing gap between the rich and the poor. The list goes on. They are so enormous, they are so serious, and they are so real to all of us that it will force us, if we can use dialogue in not only just for, as Divan models us, exemplifies us often, for picture opportunities, but to say we will get together. But not only we will sing certain songs together in the spirit of brotherhood and sisterhood, but we will also tackle difficult issues. We will talk about urban city school problems in our area. We will talk about corruption and pollution and poverty, etc. I think finding common enemies and common challenges from get-go in an attempt to create dialogue is also a wonderful opportunity. I will end with a positive note, common win-win situations. I think that's exactly, not to use this commercial term, I've been hanging out at Fuqua Business School a lot lately to talk about business ethics. So I think we have to create incentives. We have to create substantial outcomes that actually these dialogue efforts, and through dialogue creating the common ground, will actually bring something positive, something substantial and concrete to our communities. And again, we don't lack in those opportunities. We can really create many, many win-win situations between Christians, Jews, Muslims, Hindus, Buddhists, of no faith, atheists, and work together. And these common goals, enemies, and challenges, and common rewards that we can identify through dialogue is strong enough, rewarding enough, or dangerous enough if we don't attend to put our differences aside and do God's work on the face of earth. And I hope this dinner is nothing but an attempt towards that direction to create that common ground. In that spirit, I greet you again. Assalamu alaikum, and God bless every one of you.
So I guess you figured if you get into a space with a bunch of academics, there's going to be homework or classroom assignments. So this is your assignment. During dinner, you have a sheet of questions. And you're to pose those questions to one another, or those discussion points, and dive in and talk about the elephant. We're a little close to Raleigh and the GOP-run government, so maybe elephants and donkeys are the right way to say tackling those big issues. Before dinner, I want to point out one thing. In the actual name divan, you may have heard that word used before. It means a sofa, right? A divan sofa. In actuality, those sofas were used for conversation. So there you go. You're here for conversation. You have to work for your meal. Afterwards, 3 tables are going to report to the class. Okay, so I'll come around and find my 3 tables during dinner. Enjoy your meal. Please do continue to dine. I know we may not have given you enough time to eat. This evening, we are honored to have the Secretary of State of the state of North Carolina with us. Secretary Marshall, Elaine Marshall, was a member of the North Carolina State Senate before rising to statewide office, where she was elected as the first woman to a statewide executive branch. Touche. Way to go. She holds a BS in home economics from the University of Maryland and a law degree from Campbell University. She has received honorary doctorate degrees from 4 different universities, including the Republic of Moldova State University of Medicine. She taught in public schools and in the community college system. She owned a bookstore and a gift store. I need to find out where that store was. She has 5 stepchildren and 7 grandchildren, and I'm sure you have an accordion picture album in your pocketbook. Since becoming Secretary of State, she has received numerous state and national awards, and I'm going to highlight just a few of them. The North Carolina 4-H Lifetime Achievement Award, the Distinguished Attorney Award from North Carolina Association of Women Attorneys, the North Carolina Association of Educators for Women's Equality Award, and the National Notary Association's 2006 Achievement Award, and being named among the 50 most influential people in notarization in the last 50 years. She received the Most Distinguished Leadership Award from 2 national organizations in 2010, including Alpha Gamma Delta Fraternity and the Democratic Women of America. Let's all give a round of applause for our keynote speaker.
Good evening, everybody. I know you've got dinner to finish up. I've had the baklava. It's good. Don't stop till that plate is empty. I'm glad he helped me up here. There is a step over there. I am a little bit road weary, because I have just returned the first week of November from a marvelous trip, which included Turkey, where I blew out my knee. And so taking steps that are more than about 5 or 6 inches sometimes gets me, but I do it all over again and have just as much fun as I did. I'm honored to have been invited to come speak to this gathering. I have been here as a guest before. This is kind of a real personal moment to me. It's like giving a report back on the trip I just had. I do want to thank the Devon Center for assisting me. Now, I did not go on one of their organized trips. In fact, my trip turned out to be fairly unorganized. At time, it was a family trip, and they say that a camel is a horse invented by a committee. Well, our trip was worse than that as far as everybody having too many ideas. But we did have a marvelous time, and some of you, I can talk a little bit later about that. I thought I needed to maybe give a little bit of explanation before I get into my actual remarks here. The state of North Carolina has afforded me a tremendous opportunity as a citizen diplomat. You heard that one of the honorary doctorate degree was from the Medical University of the Republic of Moldova. North Carolina, many folks don't know, has an official partnership with the Republic of Moldova. It grew out of the Partnership for Peace of the early 1990s when the former Soviet Union broke up. Our government wanted to provide assistance to these former Soviet states because they were very poor and they were going to need assistance. And of course, they wanted them to come from democratic sources, Western-leaning sources. And North Carolina got paired with Moldova. The assistance was provided through the National Guards. And Governor Hunt asked me to co-chair that partnership. I have been doing that for now since 1999, and it's been the most marvelous opportunity for citizen diplomacy. And I and my office, we're just kind of like Radar O'Reilly from the old MASH show. We don't have any money, but we know a lot about little things. We know how to trade this for that, get things done, where the skeletons are buried, how to do this and that. And so we've facilitated a lot of North Carolina citizens who haven't had an interest in that country to do the kind of humanitarian, military, educational, medical, on and on, things that our state has done with the Republic of Moldova. So I think 2013, if there is such an award as being your honorary Turkish-American citizen, I'm probably in the running for that. It goes back to August this summer when I had the privilege to speak for the very first time in my life at an iftar, the Ramadan dinner for the Turkish-American community. Some of you here tonight I know were at that event. I was honored to help officially break the fast that became the part of the ceremony after that dinner. Soon afterwards, it became evident that my family trip destination, one of the two places, was going to be Turkey. So I had great help from Volkan and Keenan and some others in planning the trip. And then I have to say the highlight of the Turkish trip was not the gorgeous ruins or the turquoise Riviera or the interesting mosque or all of the other interesting things, but actually the home visit, I've lost sight of. Where's Keenan? Keenan, his brother, who is a pediatric surgeon in Turkey, picked us up and we visited his in-laws, and I'm here to tell you several things. Food and friendship are the international language that we experienced that evening. We had a wonderful time. His father-in-law's man cave where he did our dinner would be the envy of any North Carolinian, let me tell you. But the most interesting part was the things that I took for the little boys. There was an older generation, the grandparents, who didn't even attempt to speak to us. There were the two younger children in the household who were busy doing homework, and one of them was in school, but being excited young men. And while we couldn't communicate exactly either very, very well, we had the communication of mutual curiosity, mutual respect for each other, the love that an adult shows a child and the love and respect that an adult shows a senior citizen in the household. And the only real screw-up that I actually did was I took along a book about first flight here in North Carolina because it's always an interesting topic for international visitors to think about. And I accompanied the book that I gave to the two little boys with some airplanes from the museum. So the next thing I knew, international relationships were about to be destroyed with flying bombers going through the house. I'm not sure who's going to be angry with me, their mother or their grandmother, but they were going like that. So we found a lot of common ground in things that we could do. But I certainly enjoyed all the religious and historical, cultural sights, sounds, and flavors. But more important and the lasting memory was of our home visit. So, and here I am again with friends. Before I go into my remarks, let me say this about the DeVan Center. The center and what it does for North Carolina is nothing short of amazing. This dinner tonight is nothing short of amazing. Bringing thought leaders together on a Saturday night to break bread together, but to talk about the kind of issues that will shape who we are as a people. There are far too few other places that bring politicians, artists, religious leaders, scholars, academics, and chefs together to mix and mingle and learn from each other like the center does. We need so much more of what the center does in changing cold, impersonal talking points into open, caring, shared conversation. We need so much more of what the center does in our state and in our nation in these days. So my thanks to all of you who make this happen. From your advisory board members to you volunteers who go out there and actually get things done for this event. I join you in the belief that as long as we look at each other with kindness and compassion in our hearts, we can see that as people on this earth together, what we have in common is far greater than what separates us. People everywhere have hopes, dreams, and aspirations for achieving something better. People everywhere eat, pray, love, as Elizabeth Gilbert titled The Human Condition in her book. The specifics may be different, but if we can approach our differences with understanding, most of the time we find that we're a lot closer to being brothers and sisters, or at least cousins on this earth, than we are to being strangers or enemies. That's just my personal opinion. Maybe it sounds a bit mushy coming from a government agency head. But you see, I originally came from a different land, a different culture, a different background than many of my fellow North Carolinians. You may not look at me, but at one point people thought I talked funny. I was from a foreign land. I was from Maryland. But there is a little bit of Pennsylvania Dutch in my family, so maybe that's what did it. But once I got here many years ago, I came to love North Carolina. Today, it's completely and totally my home. I guess North Carolina also came around to liking me since I've now been elected 5 times as Secretary of State. So I know personally that you can love more than one land, one culture, and one people. You can grow as a person to love many lands, many cultures, and the people of many places. Learning to grow on a personal level and learning to share a love of different cultures and places and people through personal stories and personal history is not a weakness. It is a strength. When you do it with the people living next door, you simply call it neighborliness. When you do it with people from other nations and cultures, sometimes it's called friendship diplomacy, or I like citizen diplomacy. But in a lot of ways, it's exactly the same thing. When we know each other, whether it's someone across the street or across an ocean, we treat each other better. Sadly, treating each other better with kindness and mutual respect often gets short shrift in today's world of screaming headlines and sometimes screaming political leaders. My hope then is that we all realize that foreign policy is too big and too important to leave it just to a handful of government officials, because our foreign policy does not just belong to a few federal officials who work in lofty positions and powers so remote that most of us never even meet them. It belongs to you, and to you, and to you, and to me. The world is interconnected today. You, as an informed individual, can directly interact with more people and groups around the globe more quickly and more in depth than anyone has ever in the history of the world. Private organizations here in the United States can do so as well. I don't say that as a slam to this presidential administration or any other one, or political leadership of any other country. I say it because it's just simply true. It's the truth that those of us at the non-federal level play an increasingly international role as well, if we choose to do so. In my own case, as North Carolina's Secretary of State, I have met with dozens, probably over 100 different foreign delegations over the years. I tried counting up how many different countries have been represented in those delegations. I got to about 30, 35, and I just quit the list. Now I've become friends with some of those people. I think I help them understand America better as well. I know some of them help me understand their countries and their cultures. I've also traveled to countries, Turkey now included. All of this international dialogue, this international exchange, has proven to me time and time again that people have, for the most part, the same desires and hopes in life. It's also helped me to really understand what's coming next. A lot of things are coming next. This state and this nation are heading into a time when record numbers of citizens and residents are going to have close ties to other nations and other cultures. Demographically, our diversity is growing by leaps and bounds every day. This will continue for the rest of our lives and the rest of our children's lives. Many people working here in North Carolina today for our best employers, our high-tech companies and universities, are citizens of foreign countries. But the exchange is not all one way. For example, many young native-born North Carolinians now work and live in other countries. In my own family, and we're kind of a provincial small family, I have a niece who's teaching English in South Korea right now, and it's going to take a crowbar to get her out of that place. She absolutely loves being there and working with college students, high school students, elementary students, all the way up to professionals. Lots of older Americans have done the math and are now retiring to other countries where they can get more bang for their buck for their retirement incomes. After all, they can still talk to their kids and their grandkids over the internet, no matter where they live. It's happening here, it's happening in other states and in other countries. This great exchange of people and culture is a real two-way street. It's also a permanent change from the past. It is a trend that will not end. Now, I know a lot of people see all this population shifting, and they worry about terrorism or other horrible but still negative things. Those worries cannot be dismissed. It's legitimate to worry about national security. Reasonable measures always remain to address those worries. But another truth is national boundaries are eroding when it comes to the modern aspects of life. Take businesses where buying, selling, and manufacturing are blurring together so fast it makes even an MBA from Duke's head spin. Take education where students of higher education from all over the world go to anywhere they want to get whatever knowledge they need. Again, this is now just a great moment of humanity through borders into different societies. People changing where they live, sometimes for a year, sometimes for a lifetime, the likes of which we've not seen before. For those of us already comfortable with what is essentially the new reality about how modern people live, I believe we have a mission. It's the mission referenced in the invitations to tonight's dinner, dialogue and friendship. We do not need to be preaching those values. If we yell them and condemn others who don't agree with us on every point, then we're not really improving things. We just need to be showing we value friendship and dialogue above all through how we live and how we act in good times and in bad. After all, sometimes our friends and our neighbors who are less happy with change may have their own valid reasons as to why they're unhappy or stressed. You and I cannot fix those reasons. We just have to live in a way that shows the pluses outweigh the minuses in this new equation of a world that's becoming a true global village. I wrestled with whether or not to tell this story, but I will quickly. After the 9/11 terrorist attack in 2001 on New York and Washington, many people living here in North Carolina who looked different were very afraid. A group of folks who were from the Mideast, India, our friends in the Sikh community, asked some elected officials to stand with them at the state capitol in Raleigh. They just wanted to get the message out that they condemned terrorism and that they loved being here, just as we might love visiting or living in some other part of the world. They were very afraid that the emotions sweeping the country in those horrible days would bring harm to them or to their families. I agreed to stand with them at that time. It was the right thing to do. It also taught me this lesson. Wanting to always live with the values of dialogue and friendship close to your heart is something that is often fun, like when we're here enjoying each other tonight. But we do need to make sure that we don't only live these words when things are easy. We need to be ready and willing to continue the dialogue and, most importantly, the friendships on the days when things are going bad as well. That is what we will see us through to better times. That is what will lead us into the world where things do get better and better, even if the pathway to getting there is a difficult one with some stumbling blocks. So tonight, I ask each of you to stick with living these values close to your hearts in good times and in bad times. If we do that, I know North Carolina's future will grow brighter than ever in a growing, diverse, and interconnected population. A population that creates a rich, exciting culture full of different viewpoints and forms of expression. That will be the North Carolina we can love, live in, and contribute for future success. Thank you all very much.
Take the steps down if you like.
Okay, I'll do that to save my knee.
Yep. Wow, that really spoke to things that I care about and that I've also experienced while she's having a seat. I'll tell a quick story. I was in Saudi Arabia several years ago, traveled to this dusty, distant, far-off community to meet with artists, and when I walked in, they sat down and they said, "Honorable Todd Drake, we're happy you're here. We've served a special occasion for you." And on the table before us, they had a box of Krispy Kreme donuts. So I traveled around the world to get donuts that I could have gotten in Winston-Salem. Later, I had an exhibition and was showing this work in a Saudi Arabian mall. And a young man walked up and said, he looked at these girls playing basketball and he said, "Do they live in Charlotte?" I was like, "Yes, how do you know that?" He said, "I went to school with them." So that shows in, I think, a nutshell, that interconnectedness. Krispy Kreme donuts and basketball are everywhere. All right, so it's homework time. I went around, and a lot of people were still getting prepared. We'll be political and put it that way. But table 11 was deep into some really serious discussions. So, yes. And I believe our representative from the Filipino community is going to speak on their discussion.
Well, good evening to you all. My name is MJ Acosta, and I'm originally from Manila, Philippines. In behalf of the people of the Philippines, I just want to thank this country, the United States of America. I've been here since 1984. and all the countries who contributed and helped with what's going on in my beloved country right now. And I just found out that Divan Center was so kind and gracious enough to start a website, collecting funds to help the people of the Philippines as well. Thank you so much. My table was discussing about the differences and how we are supposed to actually overcome, And I think what the consensus is, we have to actually focus on our similarities instead of our differences. I was just sharing in my table that when I was new in this country, my neighbor called me, after a hard day's work, because we were babysitting children. Later that night, she said, "I'll see you later, alligator." Well, in my country, you don't call anybody an alligator. It's an insult. So I got really offended about that, And I got mad at her, and then she was just shocked looking at me like that. So I went up to our apartment. I told my husband, that neighbor of ours downstairs, she's not nice. She's mean, She just called me an alligator. And he told me, well, tomorrow morning you go down there and tell her you're sorry, and you can just tell her, for a wild crocodile. And I said, oh my gosh, then I'll be mean too, And, in that, we can tell that, what's not mean to somebody can be mean to another person. And I think we have to stop judging people just by looking at them, by the clothes they wear, by how they look. And there was something here in the very last part of the questionnaire, what's the role of education, which kind of, I put my emphasis on, because there are some part of the world where, education is not it's unheard of. There's some remote areas in the, in the world where, people they don't know how to, to read or write. And that does not make them less of a human being because of that. They are still children of God, and I think we have to respect them. And just like what one of our teachers who's in my table just said, and there's some educated people who still need to learn too. So I think we have to learn from each other. And I thank you for the opportunity you have given me, Todd, and for the Divan Center. I love you all. Thank you so much.
Great job. You get 100 points on your report card. Now, my table got into some really great heated discussions, but unfortunately, the 3 people I asked to speak all declined, so I've noted that on their participation grade. But would anyone else from our table like to get up and briefly touch on some of the subjects we tackled? We jumped on some big horses and rode them. Oh. Well, I kicked off the discussion by asking how they dealt with polarity. And last week, I was at a very different dinner with some relatives and neighbors, new neighbors. And after a couple of glasses of wine, I discovered that the man sitting across from the table was a KKK member. And so where do I go from there? My first thought was, I don't want to get shot. I want to get out of this conversation alive. So I've really been thinking about that conversation a lot. I will have to run into that person again in the future, and I'm trying to figure out how to negotiate that. So I'm accepting advice on my Facebook page. But that led into other discussions about how to handle polarity. One topic was discussed around the idea of silence, that some families and communities just put a wall of silence up. And that's almost like a white flag of, truce. We're not going to touch this at this point. And then it was also discussed quite in depth, the practice of really trying to take an idea and hold it in front of you and look at it without saying, yes, I agree. So one topic was homosexuality that we discussed. And could you hold that hot topic in front and discuss that issue without saying exactly how you feel or changing how you feel about the subject? And so We talked about the importance of that, and I think Russell, right, teaches at a high school, and Russell deserves a pay raise if anybody's in government. Because he said he jumps into debates every day of the week, that he teaches a wide extreme of students, and the only way that he can cover a topic is to just jump in and let the discussion begin. And I'm sure it gets heated, and he probably does a great job of negotiating that and making sure nobody gets shot at those discussions. Let's see, any other volunteers would like to speak briefly about your homework assignment? I was supposed to call on 3 tables. Okay. No one else dying to share something? Yes, yes, I saw a raised hand at this table. Oh, you were just picking your ear. You sure you don't want to share what you talked about? Don't ever do this again. Okay, I'll let you off. All right, well, I hope you had good conversations. I have been at dinners like this before, and I'll tell you how I'll judge how the evening goes. At the end, if you're exchanging cell phone numbers, right, or Facebook account information, I'll know that we've done a good job, that you're going to go home with new friendships. Next, we are going to learn something about the Divan experience in Turkey. We have, I think, an excellent video on Dr. Myers, who traveled to Turkey. Is he here tonight, by the way? Yes. Are you going to speak and be on TV? I don't know. Come on up. We'll look at you both ways. Welcome.
Salam alaikum, shalom aleichem. Good evening to everyone. My wife and I had been to Turkey any number of times, and in those visits had focused pretty much on archaeological sites and obvious touristic destinations. When we were invited to go on one of the Divan tours a few years back, we enthusiastically agreed. Turkey is certainly one of the most beautiful countries in the world, spanning 2 continents and bordering 8 countries. At the end of the trip, if you are lucky enough, you will be asked to identify those 8 countries. And anybody can do that right? No, this is not that easy to do, but at the end of the trip, you will know those 8 countries. I actually passed the test the first time. It is also a country with one foot in Europe and the other in Asia, steeped in modernity, modern technology, and yet deeply committed and involved in the past, the immediate past as well as the distant past. That makes it a especially compelling place to visit, tour, and meet people. Observing also how a traditionally Islamic culture can fit into a modernist mold is also a significant component of the trip. Will the young secular Turks of the revolution accept them? What is happening today with the rumblings of a disenchanted youth against a well-established leader who is stepping on some of the freedoms of that young group? All of those things come into play, no doubt, in your visit. All this makes Turkey a society that is changing rapidly and fascinating place to observe. And as we all know, as a Muslim nation with a foothold in Europe, traveling there provides a unique opportunity to get involved with individuals, as so many of you on the podium have mentioned tonight. The joy of this trip is getting to know a very special group of young Turkish citizens who, like the group assembled here through the good offices of Divan Society, are committed to open and full dialogue. And in Turkey, by opening their homes to guests like you and me, you'll have the chance to meet people from every walk of life and talk openly with them. How you, as a non-Muslim, would like to know more about Islam, and no doubt, after a few days, you will be relieved to learn that they are just like you and me, with the same hopes, the same fears that we have, and a fervent desire to let Americans know that there's a hard core of Turks who desire peace, dialogue with non-Muslims, and would also seek to continued outreach and contact with us here in our own country and in this area. You will also see highlights of this beautiful country. You will learn that early Christians settled in Cappadocia, that the Ottomans opened their gates to the Jews of Europe when Spain exiled them in 1492, and that Turkey welcomed Jewish intellectuals during World War II after being expelled from Nazi Europe, including Albert Einstein. The Divan trip is sponsored by a modern, enlightened group who wants you to learn firsthand and face-to-face that many Muslims respect other faiths and want you to know that they respect you in return. And the big payoff for you, the visitor, is that you will respect Islam and learn that what you have often read about in the press is only a distortion of that great, noble tradition, Islam. And most of you will have new friends here in the Triangle, and there on the Bosporus as well. And by the way, the food is awesome.
Oh, we're going to get him on TV too, or are we going to put that? Yes. Okay. Wow. I don't know how you'll be able to find that on Netflix for the fall. Just type in Mayors. Well, next is a point in the program very dear and near to my heart, and we're going to honor the students who won the art contest. The purpose of this effort was the promotion of peaceful coexistence among diverse members of our society, from peers to strangers and from adults to figures of authority. The diversity of cultures and ethnicities of our cities and schools provide unique opportunities for participants to demonstrate their visual expression of how best to achieve positive results in this area. Let me simplify that. How many of you enjoy looking at a blank canvas? No minimalist in the group, huh? What makes a picture beautiful is the diversity of color, the diversity of texture. And art is a reflection of us as humans. And so it's that respect for diversity that we're trying to get at with this exhibition. We want to thank the teachers of Eastern North Carolina. We had over 59 entrants participating in this contest. The winners were selected by our distinguished judges, North Carolina Central University Language and Literature Professor, Professor Chaubette, Folklore Program Director at the Department of Cultural Resources, Sally Peterson, landscape painter Marvin Soros, I hope I pronounced that correctly, Turkish Islamic Hebrew artist Morel Uzdemir. I hope I said that correctly. Our third place winner is Gabrielle Horn, and I love your work. What a great sign, what a great symbol that I saw all across the Middle East. Now, Gabriel's not in trouble, but the SBI is here tonight to award her third place winner, Miss Tiffany Cohn. Photo op, please. Now, while they're taking their picture, I'll move on to our next second place winner, Hannah Trenna. Am I saying your last name correctly? Tren. From Holly Springs High School and North Carolina State Dean of Education, Jane Flinner, will be doing the presentation. That's called a photo bomb, in case you don't know. And our first place winner goes to Christina Switzer from Wake Forest High School. Secretary of State Elaine Marshall will do the honors. An iPad Air, wow. Congratulations. Christina's going to have a few words.
Good evening. First off, I'd like to thank my fine arts instructor, Mr. Eric Van Sickle. It is truly an honor to be recognized for my artwork and my passion, and I thank you for this. Diversity itself has always been something that I hold in highest importance. I was taught since I was a child that no matter who you are, no matter what your skin color or nationality, you are a person. We are people united. We make up the world and strive to shape it into a peaceful home for all. I wanted to grasp this concept in my artwork as best as I could. The men and women of nations all over the world ask for one thing: respect. Respect is what links us together and forms the basis for coexistence. Our physical appearance isn't what defines us. It is the choices we make and our actions that define who we are. Diversity shows us how similar we are to people halfway across the world when character is being recognized. Respect should be something that is shown regardless of personal opinion. If we can grasp how important respect and human kindness are to all peoples, then I believe that the world is headed in the right direction. I hope that my artwork could provide more people with this ideal. We all work hard to make the world a better place, and it will sometimes go unnoticed. But in the long run, it makes a difference. Once again, I am very honored to receive this recognition. Thank you.
Now that's how it should be done. Good job. Well, you're going to go home hopefully with new friendships, maybe some new contacts, hopefully some great memories of a wonderful evening with a very diverse community. But we also would like one person to go home with another special gift, and that is a book. Books are like iPads, but they don't require batteries or recharging. Now, Carrie Knowles is the writer of the book we're giving away tonight. Carrie is a freelance writer and arts advocate and has been for the last 45 years. As a freelance writer, she's published dozens of short stories and hundreds of newspaper and magazine articles. She's also worked extensively in the public relations, promotions, and various media, including radio and TV. She's also written 3 books: A Family Story of Alzheimer's, that's a very near and dear subject to my heart; The Last Childhood, I need to hear about what that's about; and Lillian's Garden. Her most recent book, and you'll have to help me with this pronunciation, Ashuan? Ashuan's Rug, is what we'll be giving away tonight. Carrie has lived in Raleigh, North Carolina with her husband, Jeff, for the last 35 years. And she also attended the trip to Turkey. Do you get the idea here? Go to Turkey, okay? Today we'd like to have her come up and select the winner. So who has the pot of names? Yes, you do. Now, yeah. After she gives away the book, she's going to talk about it briefly.
Elizabeth Rose.
Yay, Elizabeth!
Life is full of surprises. About 10 years ago, I attended a bankruptcy auction, and I happened to bid on and buy a very tattered Turkoman prayer rug. You know, it was just one of those evenings. I did that, and I had no idea at that time that I would write a book about it. I had no idea that I would be at dinner tonight with all of you. I had no idea I would be at Turkey. I took the rug home, put it in my office, and I began to have dreams about this rug. And I wrote one story. A couple years later, I wrote another story. And before long, I realized I was writing a book about how things and opportunities change our lives. And that's the story of Ashwin's Rug, the story of 10 people and how this rug changed their lives. And I think that it's fitting and really wonderful that Sardar called me and said, or sent me an email and said, would I give one of my books away? I'm delighted to give my book away. I'm delighted to have been to Turkey and so pleased. If this is your first time, raise your hand. If you've never been, this is your first time here. Congratulations. Your lives will be changed. Thank you.
So our time together is just about up. We have one more speaker. We saved the best for last. Dr. Thomas is a professor and director of Applied Survey Research the Research Laboratory at North Carolina A&T State University. He holds a BS degree in general agriculture and a master's degree in continuing and vocational education from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, with a minor in management and a PhD from Louisiana State University in extension education with a minor in management. He has received prestigious grants, and he offers consultatory services still today. He was also the executive director of the Environmental Foundation of Jamaica, established by the U.S. Congress. He is married and a father of 2 children, and is here tonight with his lovely wife. So we'd like to invite him up for a closing remark. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that very generous introduction. It's late, it's after dinner, and I've been preceded with, by many distinguished speakers, so I won't keep you for very long. I'll just try and summarize the main themes of this evening's presentation, and just probably along the way I'll tell a couple of stories. But for this evening, I'd like to let the audience know too that I'm an adopted Turk. I've been there about 5 times. So from Bergamo to Chechme, from Izmir to Alashir, over the mountains to Manisa. So I've enjoyed my trips there. I knew very little about Turkey until I wrote a project and was lucky enough to get it funded, which allowed me to bring Turkish students here and send American students to Turkey. There's a very funny story about that project. I had a project for 3 years, and for the first 2 years, I could not find any students who would take up the offer to have a paid semester to learn in Turkey. They just wouldn't accept that offer, because when you say Islam, the only thing that comes to mind is 9/11. And I teach a global studies class, and the fun I have with that class is to ask them, is there any similarities between Islam and Christianity? And everybody would say no. I say, you've never heard of Abraham? And they say, who? Of course. They say, how do you explain Abraham as a similarity between Christianity and Islam? I said, well, he's the patriarch of all 3 major religions, Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. And I say, go do the research. And I set the assignment, and everybody comes back starry-eyed, because they now recognize that Islam has nothing to do with terrorism, but Islam is a major religion and a peaceful religion, and jihad is a corrupted term, right? I try to explain that jihad means your struggle to be the best human being you can ever be, right? It's not about holy war or anything like that. So my students, after having that conversation with me, get enlightened, and I was able to recruit 5 or 6 students to go to Turkey after that. So that was a very pleasant ending, and we had Turkish students there, and I was fortunate to get 1 student to be here for 1 year, 3 years, as a postdoc working with me He's back home now, and I still have him on another project, and I hope he'll return after his 2-year qualifications. He has to be back home after spending 3 years for 2 years. So after spending 2 years back in Turkey, I'm hoping that he'll be back to serve with me on that project for another 6 months or so. So that said, anyway, that is my Turkish connection, and my small effort in trying to spread dialogue, so to speak, and looking at dialogue as a conversation towards some action, taking some action that will have some concrete benefit for society. But what stands in the way, if you think about it, each of us comes to dialogue with a different type of software. And really, if we look at that software as our culture, right, and if we examine our culture, we'll find differences. What dialogue is supposed to do is to allow us to confront those differences and to talk about those differences in a trusting way, right, in a respectful way as equals. The story is told that an American was entertaining a fellow British friend, and his British companion said to him, "How do you stand being governed with people who you would never think of inviting to dinner?" And the American turned to him and said, "Well, it's simple. How do you bear being governed with people who would never dream of inviting you to dinner?" Right? So if you look at it, it's the same side of a single coin, right? So your cultural interpretation is one thing. My cultural interpretation is another thing. So I'm sorry about this. I forgot to put it on silent. Anyway, so if we look at it that way and we're willing to proceed with our differences, right, then we can reach some constructive end. For example, when I was in Jamaica, I was working on 2 different agricultural education projects, one funded by the Dutch, one funded by the Americans. Now, as you know, when you write a project, you sit at your desk, you imagine what is out there, you consult the literature, you might talk with colleagues, and you come up with your best idea, and you hope you get it funded. Well, the Dutch had this project, and when they came into Jamaica, I was very surprised. They had some developing country experience before, but what happened, we were able to talk to each other. They lived in the community, and we were able to develop mutual respect. And so once we began to implement the project, we found that what is in the project document is totally different from the context in which we have to implement the project. So we were able to discuss it as equals. And what happened was that because we were able to discuss this thing and he got a grasp of the practical situation in front of him, we traveled to Kingston to the ambassador. And I was very surprised. We were well received. And we were able to communicate what is different in the project document and what is different with the situation and the need to adapt. And the ambassador was very, very receptive. This is dialogue, right? Trying to present your case, trying to show the differences in a situation and hope that the other person on the other side of the table will also recognize that there are differences and be willing to dialogue and communicate until we can come to a common understanding. It happened. And whenever we wanted anything after that, we would get things flown from Holland in the diplomatic pouch the next day. It never took us more than 24 hours to get anything we needed, which was not written into the project document. On the other hand, on the American side of the project, I had a friend from LSU who came as the chief of party, and we struck up a very, very friendly relationship. And by talking and by discussing, we were able to create a common understanding. The difference is that we were unable to get adjustments to the project document that were meaningful given the implementation context. But we kept talking and we kept talking with his office back in Baton Rouge, and we were able to convince them that we needed to make adjustments, and so we were able to get some things done. The problem was that when you do these projects, Usually the donor country requires that you buy most of the material from either the Dutch companies or the American companies. The problem we had was that American cars don't work too well in Jamaica. So we were asking for a waiver to buy Japanese cars, which would last much longer. They're much more sturdy. And, they would outlast the life of the project, so to speak. And we had a hard time convincing Home Office to get that done. But anyway, we prevailed. The difference is, in this case, is that dialogue helped us to get to the goal we wanted to achieve. In the Dutch case, we were able to get some institutional support to get what we needed done. In the American case, even though my companion and I had a dialogue and we developed common understanding and trust, we weren't able to get the bureaucracy back home to move as fast and to be as flexible as we wanted it to be. So what I want to say this evening is that dialogue is good, but it should be focused on a purpose. But to achieve that purpose, dialogue must be supported by an institutional framework. It must have an institutional base, because when you achieve understanding, that understanding should be moved towards taking some action. And you can't take that action unless you have institutional support to move that action along. And what comes to mind here is what Nietzsche said, that an overthrow of belief is not immediately followed by an overthrow of institutions, right? The new beliefs continue to live in the now desolate and eerie halls of their predecessors. And they themselves act to preserve these houses because of the housing shortage. The housing shortage there is referring to the lack of institutional support you get when you achieve dialogue, and when that dialogue is pointing you to action, but there's no institutional support to enable that action, right? So civic groups like Divan is very important in getting dialogue started, but they're also important because they represent the institutional context in which action can be taken. And we need more civic groups like Divan, because many of the international problems that we will face, for example, the threat of global warming, other ecological issues, the threat of food insecurity, the threat of terrorism, can only be permanently solved or kept at bay or keep us out of catastrophe in any one of those areas if we have dialogue. But dialogue alone will not bring us the end result we really need. We need more civic engagement, more nonprofits, right? Because these are the basis of democracy, right? If we have these nonprofits, they will provide a vehicle through which concrete actions can be taken to solve the problem of not having the institutional base to move dialogue from an understanding to concrete actions to achieve concrete objectives on the ground. And then the other problem is that each culture, as we see it, has built-in differences, right? We see the world in different ways. You can think of culture as our worldview, the way we see the world, right? It's our software through which we act. And now, the problem is that the wide availability of technology and mass communications, right, are bringing ideas and norms close to where they weren't before, right? People are coming in contact with different ideas and different norms that allow them to question their own values, question their own cultures, and this creates discomfort. If we have more groups like Divan, whenever we come in contact with strange norms or strange ideas, these groups can help us maintain our moorings or footings, right? The dialogue that takes place in these groups will be self-reinforcing. You'll get to understand that people just like you are thinking differently, right? But they're not your enemy. Even though you don't understand and you might not accept their beliefs, you can continue to talk about it and understand your differences and reach common ground. So it's like the frog in the well, right? This frog is living in a well all his life. A bird comes up and says, "Frog, the sky is big outside there. Many different colors, beautiful colors." The frog said, "No, The sky is what I can see based on the circumference of the well, right? So we don't want to get trapped in our own well, where our culture is just allowing us to see the sky that we are able to interpret from our cultural basis. We want to be able to be like the bird in the wide open space where we have the privilege of seeing the beautiful colors, the beautiful sunset, and the diversity that nature offers. So, again, nonprofits and groups like Divan will play a very, very vital role in the future in bringing cultures together, and dialogue that creates understanding and create action, like the Secretary of State has said, is not the domain of high officials or the State Department or the foreign ministries in other countries. It's the responsibility of every citizen. And how citizens will create dialogue? By coming together in groups like this, right? What we must remember is that in today's wide open information society, individual citizens are living in the same information environment as their leaders. So they're no longer accepting just the pronouncement of their leaders. They're questioning that. And if they have a forum that can bring this questioning together, make it constructive, and get support, then we'll have action, we'll have dialogue, we'll have understanding, and we'll have action for the betterment of all mankind. Thank you very much.
Doctor, you remind me with that talk of a tattoo that I really want to get that my wife says I can't have. On the back of my legs, I want to put, and this is an African proverb, when you pray, move your feet. And I really think that was the heart of what you were talking about tonight. Well, now we have to give a few awards, and then we're done. So hang tight just a moment. I know many of us would like to start heading home and prepare for a night's sleep. But we have 3 awards we'd like to give to our speakers. So if Jeffrey Leiter, Elaine Marshall, and Terrence Thomas could please come back up to the front. We have a beautiful gift. Are our gift givers here as well? Senator Floyd McKesk, yes. North Carolina State Vice Provost Joanne Woodard, and Duke University Religion Professor Carol Myers. Hope I didn't slaughter your names. So first, is Jeffrey Leiter here? Yes. Next, Elaine, I hope you don't mind if I call you by your first name. Okay, enough of the fashion show. Come on. We want to go home. We want to go home. And Terrence Thomas. So I thought maybe after all this talk about Turkey, they would put kayak up here and show you how cheap tickets are. But they've actually put up the website for the Divan Center where you can give to the Filipino cause. So please consider that. Closing remarks. First of all, I want to thank the Divan Center for this honor. I have to say that I love these opportunities. I find great hope for the future, both in the gathering that we have here tonight and also in the beautiful artists and young people that we're seeing coming up as young leaders, creative leaders. I want to give you a challenge. You have to leave with homework. You had your class assignment. Now here's your homework. Tonight I want you to lay down your head on your pillow and say, how can I be like Rumi? Now who is Rumi? Rumi is probably the most famous Turkish poet. And Divan, by the way, also means a book of poetry. But I want to tell you, first of all, why you should be like Rumi, and then how. Rumi, when he was visited at his memorial by people from every religion, from all over the world, not just from the Muslim world. How can you be like Rumi? How do you do that? I think you take this to heart. Rumi is quoted as saying, "I always thought I was me, but in the end, I realized I was you." So I hope you will go and be the other and be like Rumi. Thank you for being with us tonight.